Picture a market, any market in any country on any continent. Stalls stretch out under corrugated tin roofs, ice trucks idle in the alley behind, and the smell of blood, salt, and sawdust hangs thick in the air. Beef, pork, chicken, lamb, goat, rabbit, duck, whole fish stacked on beds of crushed ice, gills still bright red. Whatever animal you can name, somewhere in that market, someone is selling its meat. Except one kind. Walk through 10,000 markets on 6 continents, and you will never find a lion steak next to the beef. No wolf sausage hanging beside the pork. No eagle, no tiger, no shark fillet, no fox. Humans have eaten almost everything that walks, swims, or flies on this planet. And yet an entire category of animal, the hunters, the apex predators, the ones sitting at the very top of the food chain, has been left off the menu for as long as anyone can remember. That should feel backward. You'd expect predator meat to be prized, not avoided. These are the strongest, fastest, most dominant animals in their ecosystems. Eating the top of the food chain sounds like a trophy, not a taboo. Instead, across cultures with almost nothing else in common, the same unwritten rule shows up again and again: don't eat the thing that eats other things. The obvious answer is danger. Lions bite back, wolves hunt in packs. Nobody simply walks up to an eagle and takes it. But that explanation falls apart fast. Danger has never stopped humans from anything. 12,000-pound elephants have ended up on dinner tables. Whales were hunted from open canoes with hand-thrown harpoons. Entire cultures have built their economies around chasing down animals that could crush or gore them without a second thought. Danger was never the deciding factor in what makes it onto a plate. The real answer starts with math: cold, brutal, inescapable math. Every time energy moves up one link of a food chain, most of it simply disappears. A field of grass converts only a sliver of the sunlight hitting it into usable plant energy. A cow eats that grass, and converts only a fraction of what it eats into muscle and fat. The rest burns off, just keeping the animal alive, breathing, walking, staying warm. Ecologists have a rough shorthand for this. Roughly 10% of the energy survives the jump from one level of a food chain to the next. Now imagine feeding that same beef to a wolf. Another 10% lost. Start with a field of grass, and by the time that energy reaches a predator's body, over 99% of it is already gone, burned away at every step along the way. A cow is already an expensive way to eat sunlight. A predator that eats a cow is an inefficiency stacked on top of an inefficiency. Raising predators for meat would mean feeding them animals that themselves had to be raised, fed, and grown first. Double the land, double the water, double the years, for a fraction of the final meat. Geographer Jared Diamond, writing about why certain species became livestock and others never did, pointed to exactly this problem. The cost of an animal's diet is one of the first filters that knocks a species out of contention for domestication. Temperament matters too. A domesticated animal has to tolerate crowding, tolerate humans, tolerate offense. Apex predators, by definition, are built to do the opposite. No civilization that ever domesticated animals for food chose to farm predators. Not once, not anywhere. The math never worked, and the animal never cooperated. But that's not the strangest part. Even when predator meat has been sitting right there, already dead, free for the taking, humans have still tended to avoid it. In the early 20th century, Antarctic explorer Douglas Mawson found himself stranded on the ice, hundreds of miles from base camp, starving, with nothing left to eat but his own sled dogs. He ate them. He had no other choice. But in his account of the ordeal, he described the meat as musty tasting, and so stringy it was barely possible to chew, a description echoed by other polar explorers who were forced into the same desperate choice, decades apart, on opposite sides of the ice. Predator meat, even when it is the only thing standing between a person and starvation, does not go down easily. Some of that comes down to raw biology. A grazing animal spends its whole life eating and can afford to lay down thick, marbled layers of fat. A predator burns almost everything it eats chasing down its next meal. What's left is lean, dense, fibrous muscle, closer to gristle than to the tender cuts people actually crave. Even the shape of a predator's digestive system tells the story. True carnivores evolved short intestines built to move rotting flesh through quickly, before it spoils inside them. Human intestines are proportionally far longer, built more like a plant eater's than a lion's, a quiet clue, written directly into anatomy, about what kind of diet the human body actually expects. And then there's a second problem, a more dangerous one. Every animal a predator eats leaves something behind, stored in its flesh. Heavy metals, pesticide residue, industrial pollutants that never fully break down, they just move up the chain, concentrating at every step. Scientists call this biomagnification. A small fish absorbs a trace of mercury from the water around it. A larger fish eats hundreds of those small fish and keeps every trace of mercury they were carrying. By the time the chain reaches a shark or a bluefin tuna at the very top, mercury levels can run dramatically higher than anything living below them, which is exactly why health agencies warn pregnant women to limit their tuna intake, and why shark meat consistently ranks among the most mercury-contaminated foods on the planet. A predator isn't just an animal. It's a living record of every toxin every animal below it in the chain ever absorbed. Disease travels the same route upward. The United States Centers for Disease Control has issued direct warnings about trichinosis, a roundworm infection tied specifically to eating raw or undercooked meat from wild carnivores, bears, wolves, walruses, even wildcats. It's rare in modern farmed meat because farmed animals are inspected, monitored, and regulated. Wild predators are none of those things. Eating one is a gamble against an unknown hand of parasites and pathogens, accumulated over a lifetime spent eating other animals. So predator meat is expensive to raise, difficult to chew, potentially loaded with concentrated toxins and disease, three separate, independent problems, all pointing at the same animal. Here's where the story gets genuinely strange. Centuries before anyone understood trophic energy loss or biomagnification, cultures on opposite sides of the world wrote the exact same rule into religious law, without ever comparing notes. Jewish dietary law, laid out in ancient scripture, permits only animals that chew the cud and have a split hoof, a category that automatically excludes every predator on Earth. Islamic dietary law bans the meat even more directly, prohibiting any animal that kills its prey using fangs or talons. Two traditions, developed independently, separated by centuries and thousands of miles, arrived at the identical conclusion. Don't eat the hunter. That kind of convergence rarely happens by accident. It looks more like the signature of a survival lesson, repeated so many times by so many people that it eventually got written into law. This isn't a new behavior. It goes back further than markets, further than religion, further than agriculture itself. Paleoanthropologists studying cut-marked animal bones from Gona, Ethiopia, dated to roughly 2.5 million years ago, have found evidence that some of the earliest tool-using hominins were already doing this exact thing. They scavenged meat directly from the kills of large carnivores. Sometimes that meant waiting for a predator to finish and wander off. Sometimes, researchers believe, it meant confronting the predator outright and driving it away from a fresh carcass before it could finish eating. Scientists call that second strategy power scavenging. Either way, the target was never the predator itself. It was always what the predator had already caught. And the pattern hasn't stopped playing out. It's happening right now, in real time, on the plains of East Africa, over 2 million years later. A 2024 study tracking human interactions with lions documented something researchers call kleptoparasitism, people moving in on carcasses that lions have already killed and taking meat for themselves. It happens more often, and across a wider stretch of the continent, than scientists had previously realized. But look closely at what's actually being taken in these encounters. It is never the lion. Researchers describe people walking directly past a live, resting predator to strip meat from its kill instead. The antelope, the zebra, the wildebeest the lion brought down. Humans today are still standing within arm's reach of apex predator meat, with every opportunity in the world to take it. They take the prey instead, every single time. So is the rule absolute? Not quite. And this is the part that complicates the whole story. Humans do eat some predators. Tuna, salmon, swordfish. Every one of them a hunter, sitting near the top of its food chain, and every one of them a fixture on dinner plates worldwide. If inefficiency and biomagnification apply on land, why don't they seem to apply at sea? The truth is they do, just differently. Ocean predators store their surplus energy as rich, oily fat rather than lean muscle, which is a large part of why salmon and tuna taste nothing like tough, musty bear meat. And for most of human history, nobody was farming these fish the way cattle get farmed. People were catching wild fish that had already grown, already survived, already done the inefficient work of climbing the food chain entirely on their own, at no feeding cost to the fishermen at all. The underlying efficiency problem never went away. Humans simply structured their relationship with marine predators, wild capture instead of raising them from birth, in a way that quietly sidesteps it. Which means the real answer was never one single reason. It's at least 4 separate reasons, discovered independently, by different people in different centuries, for entirely different purposes: physics, biology, medicine, and religion, all converging on the same animal, all pointing to the same conclusion. Not this one. So picture that market again. Every stall, every crate of ice, every species humanity ever decided was worth raising, hunting, or catching for food. Now picture the empty space where predator meat should be, if humans simply ate whatever was strongest or most impressive. That absence was never an accident, and no one ever had to enforce it as a rule. It's the fossil of a calculation made 1,000,000 times over by 1,000,000 different people who never wrote it down and never needed to. Walk past that empty stall one more time. It was never really empty. It's a lesson older than agriculture, older than scripture, older than the first